Welcome back to the Aubergine Chef. Now tonight we're going to be making something called macarons. And so that way you guys can avoid the nails on a chalkboard sound of me pronouncing it incorrectly because I know I'm not saying it correctly. I'm going to call it French style macarons because they are also considered French style macarons. And what they are, those little sandwiches, meringue sandwiches that you see in patisseries. Usually they're like packaged up in like a dozen. They're brightly colored green, red, yellow, orange. And they also have their meringues, so the sandwiches, but inside they have a filling. Sometimes it's ganache, sometimes it's buttercream, sometimes it's caramel. It just depends on where you get it. Today we're going to be making pistachio French macarons, and they're going to have a almost buttercream-like filling in it. It's going to be more like an American buttercream with actual butter instead of shortening. So the first thing we need to do is you need to shell 4 ounces of pistachios, or 1 cup, and then you need to peel off the brown papery skin. Now that's kind of difficult to do, so what we're going to do is we're actually going to blanch our nuts. Now this is going to increase the time it takes to make these, but at the same rate it's going to reduce the time it takes to peel off this skin, and I find peeling the skin a lot more frustrating than boiling it and blanching it and then peeling it off and then letting them cool. Okay, so once your water comes to a boil, go ahead and add your pistachios, and then we're going to boil them for 2 minutes. Okay, so then once you have it boiled for 2 minutes, go ahead and drain it. Okay, and then we're going to put it on a paper towel to dry. And we're just going to let them cool just enough to the point where we can start handling them. And then once you can handle them, it's very easy to peel off the skin. It just literally just rubs right off. And then you have a pistachio that's been peeled. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and finish peeling off these pistachios. Okay, so once you have your pistachios peeled, you want to go ahead and weigh out the rest of your ingredients while they're drying. I had them in a single layer on a paper towel, drying up. There's not too much water on it, but it's good to get them as dry as possible so that way they don't turn into a paste in the food processor. So next thing you want to do is you want to separate your eggs. We need 3 egg whites. Remember, to separate an egg, crack it open carefully, and then pass the yolk back and forth between the shell, allowing the white to drop through. Okay, next we need to sift 1 1/4 cups of powdered sugar, or 6 ounces of powdered sugar. And what we're doing is we're going to get rid of all those lumps. Okay, I may have forgotten to mention that we need 2 sheet pans lined with parchment paper set aside, ready for us to put the macaroons, the French macaroons, on top. And you also want to have a bowl which contains 2 ounces of sugar and just a pinch of salt. And this is what we're going to use to make our meringue. Okay, so after you've weighed up all of your ingredients, let's go ahead and start with the pistachios. What we're going to do is we're going to grind them up. Okay, you just want to get it started. You want to go ahead and add in your powdered sugar. Okay, and then we want to pulse this, or grind this until it's a very fine powder. Okay, once you've ground it up, we're going to go ahead and sift it. And what we're doing is we're trying to make the pistachio powder as fine as possible. The finer the pistachio powder is, the better your French macaroons are going to come out. So this may take a couple times. You may want to sift it, and there's any large chunks that don't go through the sift, you want to go ahead and puree it again in the or grind it again, I'm sorry, in the food processor. So this probably will take about 2 to 3 times. Okay. Now this is very similar to the Japanese recipe on my website. We're basically going to make a French meringue with the sugar and the egg whites. So remember, whenever we make a meringue, we want to wipe out the bowl with a damp paper towel that's been dampened with vinegar. You want to wipe out the entire bowl and the whip with vinegar, and that breaks up any small, naked to the visible eye spots of fat. So that way, because any little bit of fat will prevent the egg whites from whipping up. So you want to make sure that you get rid of all the fat from the bowl as much as you can. You can also wash the bowl with very, very hot water and lots of soap, but wiping it out with vinegar works really well, works every time. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and make our meringue now that our powder is all finished. So go ahead and put your 3 egg whites into the mixer bowl. And then we're going to go ahead and add the sugar and salt after it is whipped up to frothy. Okay, go ahead and add in your sugar in a slow, steady stream. Okay, whip up your eggs to stiff peaks and they'll be finished. Okay, and now we're going to fold in our pistachio powder. Okay, so go ahead and fill your pastry bag with the meringue powder mixture. And I'm using an 806 round tip. And what we're going to do is we're going to pipe little rounds that are about 1 1/4 inch wide. So you want to start in the corners. Okay, and what you're doing is you're not pressing directly onto the parchment paper. You're actually holding it up a little bit, and you're holding it in place. And then you kind of spiral out when you finish piping, so that way you can try and get rid of the tip. You might have to go back with your finger and push down the tips that form, the little peaks that form in your meringue. You want these as flat as possible, but you also want them to have a dome shape. You really don't want them to have any points. So go ahead and finish piping the rest of the meringues. You need them to be about 2 inches apart in spacing. And remember, they're about 1.25 inches wide. And then we're going to let them sit at room temperature for an hour. Okay, so our pistachio meringues, or whatever you want to call them, I guess they're the French macaroons. They have kind of formed a skin from being out for about an hour. And so we're going to go ahead and put them in the oven. Remember, we're going to put them in the oven at 325 for about 12 minutes. Okay, so while our French macaroons are baking in the oven, why don't we go ahead and make the filling? So this is 4.5 ounces of powdered sugar and 1 ounce of pistachios. And I didn't really sift them because we don't need the filling to be as fine but feel free to sift it if you'd like. Okay, and we're going to go ahead and grind it until we have a powder again. Okay, so once you have your powder, go ahead and go back to your mixer. You can do this in the food processor. The recipe that I have says you can do it in the food processor, but I like to make my fillings on the mixer. What we're going to do is we're going to mix up our butter. Remember, this is room temperature butter, and it's 6 tablespoons. Okay. Just break up the butter so it's not one big clot in there. Then add your powdered pistachio mixture. Then we need to add a 1/4 teaspoon of almond extract. Don't have to measure it, just pour it right in. And a 1/4 teaspoon of vanilla extract. Okay, let's go ahead and mix that together until we have a light, airy filling. Okay, go ahead and take your mixer off your filling off the mixer and put it in a pastry bag. And I'm going to use a very small straight tip, probably an 801 for filling. Okay, so our French macaroons have completely cooled down. I actually turned the oven down to 300 degrees, so I felt that 325 was just a little too hot. And I did rotate my pans halfway through, so about six minutes I switched the pan's positions in the oven so that way they wouldn't get too dark on the bottom. And actually this made a lot of French macaroons, and I ended up not spacing them 2 inches apart. As you can see, and they came out okay. They're cracked on the top a little bit, and I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that it was too hot in the oven. So ideally, these little guys should be crisp on the outside and soft and moist on the inside. So as you can see, like if you have it too dry, it may collapse on itself like this one did. So I think a lower temperature in the oven is a better bet. But you don't want to go so low. You don't want to go so low to the point where it dries out the entire thing evenly like a regular macaroon or a regular meringue cookie, because then you wouldn't have that soft, moist inside that these cookies are so well known for. So, these aren't really easy cookies to make as it was noted in the cookbook. The book I actually used is called Unforgettable Desserts by Dee Wilson. I'll have that in my blog post, a link to it so you can see. But anyway, why don't we go ahead and fill out the ones we have. Also, as you can see, mine are very pale in color, and that's because I didn't add any food coloring. Feel free to add food coloring if you want when you are mixing the meringue. So you can use an offset spatula, but I would like to use a pastry bag. And you just want to pipe some of your filling. Not a whole lot. You don't want it squeezing out. And that's pretty much it. And that might be even a little bit too much filling. Well, anyway, fill with about a teaspoon of the filling until you get a nice, I think this is probably ideal. It's not sticking out, but it's not oozing out either. But you want to be able to see it. Like this one probably could use a little bit more. It's probably a little bit too much cookie to filling ratio, too much cookie. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and fill the rest of my coconut, or sorry, I can't get over this. It's very difficult for me to call them French macaroons. It's like I just want to say coconut macaroons or the macarons incorrectly, or my spectacular pronunciation. But anyway, I'm going to finish filling these, and then when we come back, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. Okay, so that's how you make French macaroons or macarons. Remember, these aren't the most perfect ideal ones because they've got some cracking in them and they're not perfectly domed, just because I guess the egg whites were just a little bit too stiff, but you can always fix that by pushing down on them a little bit more than I did. Also remember that if you want to add food coloring, you can add whatever color of food coloring you want to the meringue after you've like added in the pistachio flour, so that way you're not really destroying the integrity of the meringue. And just go ahead and just like fold it in, stir it in, and that way you get a nice bright colored macaron, French macaroon. And so this is the book I was telling you about, the Unforgettable Desserts by D.D. Wilson. This is the cookbook that I got the recipe out of. When I googled macaron, this was one of the most, this was the most popular book, so I decided to give it a try, and it was a pretty reliable recipe, I should say. Just remember that this makes a lot of these little macarons, the French macaroon halves. So you're going to have a lot of cookies if you decide to make them in their entirety. So anyway, I hope you learned a lot today, and remember, the Aubergine Chef, demystifying dessert one recipe at a time.